Welcome to Ghosts of Asia, where forgotten rituals, cursed buildings, and ancient shadows still walk among the living. Tonight's story is not folklore from centuries past. It's happening right now, in the quiet corners of modern Taipei. A broke graduate student thought she found the deal of a lifetime, a fully furnished studio in the city center, cheaper than anything else on the market. The only catch? A single rule in the contract: never stay past 3:33 a.m. She laughed it off, signed the lease, and moved in. But when she broke the rule just once, time stopped, the mirrors lagged, and something else moved in. This is the story of what happens when you break a rule meant to protect you from something that no longer follows the rules of our world. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and remember, if your reflection ever blinks after you do, don't look again. She had been scrolling for hours. Cheap rentals in Taipei weren't just rare, they were practically mythical. Every time she clicked on a place that looked remotely decent, it was either already taken, had hidden fees, or required at least 6 months' rent up front. As a broke graduate student living off instant noodles and late-night tutoring gigs, she couldn't afford any of it. Not until this one popped up. Modern studio, fully furnished, prime location near the MRT. Rent nearly half the market average. No deposit, no agent fee. The only requirement: signing a rental agreement with one clause bolded in red. She squinted at the screen. Tenant must not remain on the premises between the hours of 3:33 a.m. and 3:34 a.m. under any circumstance. Violation of this term voids liability. That was it. She blinked. Surely that was a joke, a prank listing, a marketing trick. The photos didn't look fake. In fact, they looked too perfect. The flat had a sleek white interior, polished wood floors, a large bed tucked under a clean window, a small kitchenette, and a full-length mirror attached to the wall near the foot of the bed. The mirror reflected nothing unusual, just a neat, cozy space. She clicked through the images again, pausing at the last one. It showed the mirror directly with what looked like the faintest blur in the corner. Maybe a smudge, maybe nothing. The listing had only been up for 10 minutes. On impulse, or maybe desperation, she messaged the landlord. He responded instantly. His tone was short, professional, emotionless. "If you're serious, I can meet you today. Bring cash for 1 month's rent. No questions about the clause. Do not waste my time." Something about his urgency felt off, but the offer was too good to ignore. She was running out of time. Her current lease ended in 2 days, and her roommate had already replaced her with a boyfriend who didn't like freeloaders. She had nowhere else to go. 2 hours later, she stood outside the building, staring up at the 5th floor window of the studio. The neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. No vendors shouting, no traffic noise, no distant TV chatter from windows. Just silence. The landlord arrived exactly on time. He didn't smile. He handed her a single sheet of paper and a pen. She read it carefully. The clause was real. Do not stay past 3:33 a.m. She almost asked him why, but something in his eyes said, "Don't." She signed. The key felt cold in her hand. The key clicked into the lock with a soft resistance, like the door hadn't been opened in weeks, or maybe longer. The hinges groaned faintly as she stepped inside, greeted by a rush of cool, dry air. It was exactly like the photos, minimalist, spotless, almost too clean. A bed with crisp white sheets sat neatly in the corner, facing a window shaded by thick, pale curtains. The kitchenette was tiny but functional. A sleek white desk faced the far wall, and there it was, the full-length mirror near the foot of the bed, bolted directly to the wall. She stared at her reflection for a moment. It stared back, still and obedient. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose bun, her oversized hoodie hanging off one shoulder. She looked tired, but also relieved. She'd done it. She had a place of her own. No roommates, no judging eyes, no noise. She set her backpack down and wandered through the space, letting her fingers brush over the cold marble counter, the unused faucet, the smooth glass of the wardrobe doors. Everything felt untouched, as if no one had lived here before. The rental agreement sat folded on the desk. She hadn't dared read it too closely earlier. She'd been too eager, too desperate. But now, curiosity pulled at her. She unfolded the paper and scanned the single clause again. Tenant must not remain on the premises between the hours of 3:33 a.m. and 3:34 p.m. under any circumstance. Violation of this term voids liability. It didn't say why. It didn't warn of consequences. No mention of noise complaints, safety hazards, or maintenance issues. Just a line in red. She Googled it. 3:33 a.m. Taiwan spiritual meaning. A flood of links filled the screen. Folk beliefs, ghost hour myths, numerology posts, horror stories. 3:33 was supposedly the mirror of death's hour, a time when the spirit world brushed closest to the living. Some said it was the reverse of 3 p.m., the traditional time of protection and light. Others claimed that anything happening at 3:33 was a message, an omen. She snorted and shut the browser. Superstition, probably meant to scare off partiers and late-night squatters. Or maybe it was some marketing tactic to add mystery and buzz around the listing. Either way, it didn't matter. She had no plans to be up that late. Her program was brutal. Her body couldn't handle anything past midnight anymore. Still, when she walked past the mirror again, she slowed. Her reflection moved in sync, but the longer she looked, the more she noticed the subtle silence of the room. It wasn't just quiet, it was still. She shook it off and busied herself with unpacking. The landlord had said nothing else, didn't offer a welcome, didn't even show her the fuse box, just handed her the key, collected the envelope of cash, and walked away without looking back. That night, she collapsed into bed before midnight. The city outside whispered in muted tones, distant cars, the hum of a scooter engine, a dog barking once. But inside her studio, it felt like time was already beginning to stretch thin. And somewhere near the mirror, she thought, just for a second, she heard something shift. The next morning arrived in a wash of pale sunlight, filtering through the heavy curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The bed beneath her was softer than the dorm mattress she'd been used to. The air smelled like dust and lemon cleaning solution. Then it came back to her. The deal, the strange clause, the mirror. She sat up slowly, glancing around the room. It was quiet again. Too quiet. No morning traffic outside. No sound from neighbors. No footsteps in the hallway. Just the low hum of her mini-fridge and her own breathing. She slid her feet onto the cold floor and padded over to the mirror. Her reflection stared back. Unremarkable, just as it should. Still, she hesitated before brushing her teeth in front of it. Something about it didn't feel like a normal mirror. It wasn't warped or cracked. It just felt heavy, present, like it was waiting. After breakfast, she started organizing her things. She folded her few pieces of clothing into the wardrobe. She unpacked her books onto the shelf beside the bed, set her laptop on the desk, and pinned a small calendar on the wall. It didn't take long, She owned so little, but it felt good, quietly powerful. There were no signs of any previous tenant, no marks on the wall, no forgotten items in the drawers, not even dust in the corners. The whole studio felt like it had been scrubbed clean of memory, a blank slate. That should have comforted her. Instead, it made her uneasy. She spent the rest of the day getting groceries and exploring the nearby streets. Everything was strangely perfect. There was a bakery 2 blocks away that sold fresh pineapple buns, a small convenience store on the corner, and a quiet park just across the street. It felt like the kind of neighborhood you'd never notice on a map, but once you moved in, you'd never want to leave. That night, after a warm shower and a simple dinner, she curled into bed with her laptop and started studying. The hours slipped by unnoticed as she highlighted PDFs, jotted notes, and sipped lukewarm tea. At one point, she glanced at the time. 2:51 a.m. Her heart jumped. She had promised herself she'd be asleep well before now. She shut the laptop, brushed her teeth quickly, and climbed into bed without looking toward the mirror. Lying in the dark, she listened. Not for anything in particular, but because the silence was now louder than ever. It wasn't the kind of quiet that came from good insulation. It was suspended, artificial. Still, exhaustion won. Her eyes drifted shut. And just before she slipped into sleep, she thought she heard the clock ticking louder. Tick, 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 like it was racing against something, or warning her that something was getting close. The days that followed passed in a strange sort of peace. She settled into a rhythm. Morning coffee, classes online, afternoon walks, late-night study sessions. The apartment stayed spotless. The utilities worked. No strange noises, no flickering lights, no obvious red flags. It was almost disappointing. She told herself the rule was probably just superstition, or maybe legal protection. Maybe someone had died in the unit before, and this was the landlord's twisted way of handling it. But if that were the case, wouldn't she have felt something by now? Instead, she felt nothing. Not boredom, not peace. Just a strange, gnawing nothing. Even the air inside the flat felt too still. When she opened the windows, there was barely any breeze. When she lit incense, the smoke curled upward in a perfect line, as if the air refused to move. Her neighbors never made a sound. She saw them only once, a man with a limp and a child holding a stuffed rabbit. But they passed her on the stairwell without a word, eyes forward, like they hadn't even seen her. Most nights, she tried to sleep by 1, but her study load grew heavier, and the quiet of the studio made it too easy to get lost in her work. The silence didn't distract, it consumed. It absorbed every sound. And then there were the moments, fleeting, almost missable, when she felt watched. Not from outside, not from the door, but from the mirror. She'd glance at it in passing and see her reflection turn just a second too late. Or she'd wake up at 3 a.m., her throat dry, and notice the outline of her body in the mirror looking just slightly off, tilted, blurred, like an image loading on a bad internet connection. She told herself it was just exhaustion. Screens all day, bad posture, stress. But one evening, as she sat brushing her hair on the edge of the bed, she noticed something strange. She wasn't moving, but her reflection was still catching up, just a flicker, a half-second behind. Then it synced again. She stared at herself, her face, her eyes, her mouth. Nothing unusual. But behind her, in the mirror's reflection, the room looked darker than it did in real life. She turned around. The room was lit normally. She turned back to the mirror, still dim. It blinked back to normal before she could react. She stood up, her skin prickling. Something was off. But what? No sounds, no shadows, no whispers, just the stillness. It was a silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like holding your breath before something steps into the room. It happened on a Wednesday night, the kind of night where everything felt just slightly off-center, like the world had been tilted a few degrees while no one was looking. She had been studying late again, earbuds in, the soft hum of piano music drifting through her skull. Hours passed without her noticing. Her tea had gone cold. The room was dim, lit only by her laptop screen and the small desk lamp in the corner. She closed her eyes for a moment. Just a moment. When she opened them again, something was wrong. The light flickered, not visibly, but in feeling, like the brightness had skipped a beat, like a frame had been dropped. She sat upright, checked the time, 3:09 a.m. Too late. She hadn't meant to stay up this long. A nervous laugh slipped out. Still safe, still under the limit. She shut the laptop, yawned, stretched, then froze. The mirror. Her reflection was still stretching, just a second behind. Then it snapped into sync. She blinked hard. Was she seeing things? Was her mind playing tricks on her? She walked over to the mirror and stood directly in front of it, breathing slowly, watching. Her reflection matched her exactly. Same breath, same blink, same shifting weight. She raised her hand. It raised its hand. She smiled. It smiled. Then she stopped smiling, and it didn't. For just a fraction of a second, the reflection kept smiling. A beat too long, a glitch. Then, it caught up. She stumbled back, knocking into the edge of the bed, heart pounding, breath shallow. Her brain tried to reason. Lagging eyes, tired brain, nothing supernatural. She hadn't slept properly in days. She was under pressure. She was hallucinating. Still, she grabbed a scarf and draped it over the mirror, just for the night, just to settle her nerves. But as she climbed into bed, she noticed the air had changed again. Heavier, denser. Still no sound outside, no breeze. The curtains hung like stone. At 3:33 a.m., she was still awake, and that's when she heard it. A knock. Soft, hollow, not from the front door, from inside the wardrobe. Not on it, in it. She held her breath, waited. Another knock, this one slower. 3 seconds passed, 4, then silence. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. And in the morning, when she pulled the scarf off the mirror, there was a handprint on the glass, small, faint, as if left by a child pressing its palm against it from the other side. But her reflection showed nothing there. Nothing at all. She started going to bed earlier after that night, not out of discipline, but fear. Each evening, she checked the time obsessively. 1:47, 2:12, 2:59. Never again would she risk falling asleep too close to that hour. Not after what she'd heard, not after what she saw. But even with her caution, the sense of dread only grew stronger. Some nights, she'd wake up suddenly, heart pounding, convinced someone had whispered her name. Other times, she'd open her eyes to find the scarf she'd draped over the mirror lying on the floor. Once, she swore she heard a soft shuffle in the corner, like feet dragging across hardwood, but when she turned on the light, the room was empty. Still, she hadn't broken the rule, not completely, not yet. But the apartment had started reacting to her. The lights buzzed faintly, even when turned off. Her voice, when she spoke aloud, echoed with a half-second delay, like the room was mimicking her. She once caught herself humming, only to stop and realize the humming continued for one beat longer than her lips moved. And the mirror. Always the mirror. It never fogged when she showered. It never showed streaks, no matter how many times she wiped it. But it always felt cold, ice cold, even when sunlight hit it directly. On the 6th night, it escalated. She had just shut off her laptop at 3:18 a.m., quietly proud of herself for remembering the time. She brushed her teeth quickly, glanced at the mirror, nothing unusual, and slid under the covers. She closed her eyes. And then, knocking. 3 soft knocks from inside the wardrobe. Her eyes flew open. She sat up, frozen. The digital clock on her nightstand blinked. 3:31. Still time. Still safe. She waited, heart racing. 3:32. The silence deepened. The room held its breath. And then 3:33. The moment the numbers changed, everything stopped. The buzz of the fridge, the whir of electricity, even the faint glow from the hallway light under her door disappeared. The air grew thick, heavy, frozen, like the room had been dipped in syrup. She reached for her phone. The screen wouldn't turn on. Dead. Impossible. It had 72% battery 10 minutes ago. She whispered, "Hello?" and heard her voice bounce back, warped, like underwater. Then came the sound, a scrape from the mirror. She turned, slowly. Her reflection was standing, but she wasn't. It looked at her, tilted its head, then smiled. She screamed, but no sound came out. The lights flickered, and suddenly everything snapped back. The fridge hummed. Her clock now read 3:34. The mirror showed only her, sitting in bed, trembling, breathing hard. She didn't sleep that night. And when morning came, the scarf was back over the mirror, tied in a perfect knot, one she knew she hadn't made. She didn't tell anyone. Who would believe her? That a mirror moved on its own? That her reflection smiled without her? That time itself seemed to hold its breath at 3:33 a.m.? She convinced herself she was just tired, sleep-deprived, stressed. It had to be that. So she made a plan. Go to bed earlier, set multiple alarms, stay away from the mirror after dark, and avoid 3:33 at all costs. And for a while, it worked. A week passed. Nothing happened. The knocks stopped. The lights stopped flickering. Even the echo in her voice faded. She started to think maybe it had all been in her head, that her fear had conjured it. But then came the night she broke the rule. She didn't mean to. She'd been working on a deadline, eyes heavy, the air warm around her. The soft hum of her desk lamp and the rhythm of typing lulled her into a kind of trance. She blinked once, then again, and then nothing. When she opened her eyes, the room was dark. Her laptop had gone to sleep. Her tea was cold. She sat up slowly, blinking away the haze of unplanned sleep. And that's when she saw the clock. 3:36 a.m. She froze. A wave of cold washed over her body. Not panic, not fear. Something older, something deeper. She had broken the rule. Her first instinct was to move, to run, to get out. But her body didn't respond, because the room was no longer moving. The air was perfectly still. The clock had frozen. Not stopped, frozen. The digits flickered faintly, stuck in place. Her phone wouldn't turn on. Her watch wouldn't tick. And then, no sound. Not silence, the absence of sound itself. She stood, slowly, legs shaking. The mirror was still covered, but she felt it watching. She stepped toward the window, looked outside. The world had stopped. Cars hung mid-turn. A cat on the sidewalk stood frozen, paw lifted. Even the breeze in the trees had paused. It wasn't night, it wasn't morning, it was the in-between, and she had stayed too long. From behind her, she heard it. A low, dragging scrape, like something shifting against wood. She turned, slowly, toward the wardrobe. The door was slightly ajar. No breath came from her lips. She stepped back. The mirror, still covered, vibrated softly, like something behind it was pulsing, breathing, waiting. She reached for the front door. The knob wouldn't turn. She was trapped. And then, in the stillness, she heard a whisper. Not loud, not clear, but close. Right beside her ear, it said, "Finally." The lights flickered once, then everything returned. Time snapped back. The fridge hummed. The air moved. The lights steadied. But she remained frozen, her hand still on the doorknob, her heart racing. Because in that instant between time, she had crossed over, and something had noticed. She didn't leave the apartment for 2 days. She kept the lights on at all hours, barely ate, barely slept, and avoided the mirror entirely. Every sound made her flinch. Every silence made her panic more. She replayed it again and again. The frozen clock, the still city, the whisper. "Finally," it had said. What did that mean? Who or what had been waiting? And how had it known she would break the rule? When she finally dared to uncover the mirror, she did it slowly, hands shaking. The glass was clean, reflective, silent. Her reflection stared back. She leaned in, looked closely, and noticed something that chilled her to the bone. There was dust in the room, on the shelves, on her desk, but the surface of the mirror was spotless, too spotless. Not just clean, untouched, like it didn't collect dust at all, like it wasn't part of the world anymore. She stepped back. The mirror still showed her exactly as she was, but as she moved away, it seemed to lag again, ever so slightly. She blinked. Her reflection blinked a beat later. She raised her hand slowly. Her reflection did the same, then dropped it a second too early. The sink was breaking. Whatever barrier had once held was thinning now. And then came the dreams. Each time she fell asleep, even for a minute, she found herself standing in the studio, but everything was bathed in a dim, bluish light. The furniture was the same, but somehow older, decayed. The windows were sealed shut. The mirror was uncovered, pulsing softly like a heart. She would walk closer, unable to stop herself. Her reflection was always there, but different. Not wrong, just off. It would move before she did, smile before she thought to, and it always reached out first. When she woke, her sheets were damp with sweat. Her fingernails were dirty, as if she'd clawed at something in her sleep. Then, one morning, she awoke to find a smudge on the inside of the mirror. Not outside, inside. A handprint, larger than hers, and below it, a faint set of letters traced in the condensation. "Stay." She backed away, heart hammering. That day, she tried to leave the apartment, tried to go anywhere, but the door wouldn't open. Not jammed, not locked, just stuck. No matter how she twisted the knob, no matter how hard she pulled, it wouldn't budge. She screamed for help out the window. No one answered. No one looked. The world outside was moving again, but it was like she had been cut out of it, tracked between seconds, between mirrors. And every time she passed the glass, her reflection stood just a little too still, as if it were waiting, as if it knew the next time 3:33 came, it wouldn't be the one waking up. She began hearing her own voice when she wasn't speaking. At first it was subtle, a breath, a cough, a soft that echoed a beat too late. But soon it grew louder, clearer, as though the walls were repeating her, as though something was trying to mimic her speech but didn't quite understand how human rhythm worked. She tested it. She whispered, "Hello." 1 second, 2. Then from behind her, "Hello." Same pitch, same cadence, but hollow, off, like her voice had bounced through a tunnel that didn't quite belong to this world and come back warped. She spun around, nothing there. The mirror was covered again. She hadn't dared leave it exposed after the last dream, but it didn't matter. The mirror was no longer the only thing reflecting her. The apartment had become a chamber of delayed reactions. When she opened the faucet, water would take an extra second to appear. The light switched, clicked, but the bulb took a breath before responding. Even her shadow seemed to hesitate at times, reacting to her movement a moment too late. She was no longer living inside time. She was slightly behind it, or maybe ahead. Once she sneezed, and 2 seconds later heard the echo from the closet. The worst came when she tried to record it. She turned on her phone's voice recorder and said her name, waited, then played it back. Her voice came through once, then silence, and then a second voice. Same tone, same name, but whispered, drawn out, and spoken with a kind of hunger. She dropped the phone. The screen went black. It never turned on again. Every attempt to call for help failed. Her messages never sent, her calls never connected. Her laptop screen glitched constantly now, flickering between her desktop and a grainy black and white feed of her own room. But in the feed, she wasn't there. Or sometimes, something else was. A figure, standing near the mirror, not moving, not blinking, just waiting. She began marking time on paper, every hour, every minute, drawing lines, counting seconds aloud to make sure time still worked. But she couldn't keep up. Some days felt like they repeated, others vanished entirely. She'd awake and not know what day it was. Her own memory betrayed her. Food would appear in the fridge that she didn't buy. Clothes would move from one drawer to another. One morning, she found her calendar marked with red ink. She didn't own a red pen. The note read, "You were already here." That night, at 3:33, the knocking didn't come from the wardrobe. It came from under the bed. And when she looked, for the first time, there was no reflection at all. She knew she wasn't the first. No apartment this cheap stays unclaimed in Taipei without a reason. Someone had lived here before her, maybe many someones. But no one had said anything. No reviews, no online mentions, no public complaints. It was like the place had never existed until the moment she found it. That alone should have been enough, but now, after everything, the frozen hour, the time echoes, the shifting mirror, she needed answers. She needed proof that she wasn't going insane, that someone else had seen what she was seeing. She started at the building office, a small, dusty room tucked behind a locked glass door on the first floor. She rang the bell. No one came. She rang again. Finally, an old man shuffled out from behind the curtains, keys jangling at his hip. He looked at her like he recognized her, but didn't want to. "I live in Unit 5C, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Do you know who lived there before me?" He didn't answer at first, just stared. Then, in a gravelly voice, he muttered, "You shouldn't be asking about that." She pressed, asked again, more firmly. He looked past her, toward the stairwell, then back into her eyes. "No one stays there long. They don't break the lease. They just disappear every time." She felt her stomach twist. "How many people before me?" He shrugged. 3, maybe 4. Hard to say. The listings always go back up within days. "Do you know their names?" "No," he said. Then after a pause, "They never left anything behind, not even a toothbrush." That wasn't right. No tenant leaves without a trace, not unless they're forced, not unless something takes them. She left the office shaken. On her way back up, she checked every mailbox in the lobby. Hers was labeled with a sticker, just her unit number, no name. She checked the others. They all had names written in pen or faded marker, except one more, 5C, another label, torn slightly, like it had been peeled off and replaced too many times. That night, she searched the building's rental history online. Nothing showed up for Unit 5C. No records, no archived listings. But when she checked the photo gallery from the original ad, the one she'd found weeks ago, she saw something new. Or maybe something old. The final image, the one of the mirror. It wasn't the same as before. There was a figure now, barely visible, standing just to the left of the mirror's edge, like someone trying to step out. She zoomed in. It wasn't her. It was a man, face blurred, head slightly tilted, hands at his sides. He looked lost, or waiting. Her chest tightened. She dug through her saved photos. She still had the original version on her phone. She opened it. Same picture, no figure. She opened the online version again. The man was still there. A new image had overwritten the old. Or maybe something was showing itself now that it knew she had crossed the line. She closed her phone and walked slowly to the mirror, pulled the scarf away. Her own reflection stared back, pale, trembling. But behind her, just over her left shoulder, a man, standing, smiling, not moving. And she was too afraid to turn around and see if he was really there. She didn't sleep that night, not after what she saw. She kept the lights on, the mirror covered, and her back pressed to the wall. Every creak of the floor, every shift in the shadows felt like it might be him, the man in the photo, the figure behind her, the one smiling when she wasn't. By sunrise, she knew she couldn't stay much longer, but she also knew leaving wouldn't be that easy. Whatever was happening here had already followed her, past reason, past time. It was stitched into her breath, her voice, her reflection. And then she remembered something. During one of her many desperate online searches, she had come across an obscure forum post. It had seemed unhinged at the time, someone ranting about mirrors being portals and 3:33 a.m. being the moment they opened. She dismissed it then, but now it didn't feel so ridiculous. She found the post again, buried deep in a forgotten thread. Time-binding ritual. Do not attempt unless prepared. Mirror must face sleeping body. 333 is the crossing. Only safe if sealed afterward. If unsealed, entry is possible. Beneath that, a reply. It worked for me once, but I didn't close it. She came through. She read it again, over and over. Time binding, mirror, sealing. The next step was clear. She had to find out what this ritual was, where it came from. She printed the thread, grabbed her coat, and left the apartment. The door finally opened, but only after she turned the knob 3 full times and whispered, "Let me go." The city was loud, alive, almost too bright. After days inside, it felt like returning to a world that had moved on without her. She took a taxi across the river to an old spiritual goods shop she had remembered seeing near the university, a place filled with incense, charms, and half-whispered prayers. The woman behind the counter looked at her like she already saw what was following her. "You came from the mirror," the woman said, not as a question. She nodded slowly. The woman led her to the back room, where the scent of sandalwood was thick in the air, and shelves overflowed with tattered books. She pulled one down, a cloth-bound manual with faded Chinese characters and a cracked spine. "This is what you're looking for, but it's not safe. This ritual was banned, forbidden even among monks." "Why?" "Because it didn't just open windows, it broke walls." She turned the pages, diagrams of rooms, circles around beds, incantations beside drawings of full-length mirrors, and always, always 333. It was meant to let the living speak with the dead, but it requires intent, silence, and a perfect reflection. If anything impure crosses the threshold, the bond can't be undone. "Like a spirit?" The woman shook her head. "Not a spirit, time itself, twisted, shattered, made aware." She felt her throat tighten. "Can it be reversed?" she whispered. The woman hesitated. "Yes, but only if you finish what was started. Complete the ritual and seal it before the hour ends." "How?" "You must look into the mirror at exactly 333, not before, not after. Acknowledge what's on the other side and refuse it." She left the shop with the book, a talisman of black thread and bone, and a mind full of dread. That night, as the city prepared for sleep, she sat cross-legged in front of the mirror, candle lit, curtains drawn, book open on her lap. She stared at her own face until her eyes blurred. Then she waited. Tick, tick, 3:33 a.m. She inhaled, looked up, and the mirror no longer showed her. The mirror no longer showed her. It showed the room, yes, the bed, the desk, the walls, but she was gone from it. She was still kneeling there in front of the mirror, heart pounding, breath sharp, but the reflection didn't contain her. The glass was like a photograph taken moments before she arrived, or after she was gone. And then movement. A figure stepped into the reflection from the left, slow, deliberate. It was her, or something wearing her shape. But this version moved differently. Its head tilted too far to the side, neck straining with a sickening grace. The eyes were dull, glassy, the smile empty. It walked to the center of the room and stood, facing the mirror, facing her. She stared at it, and then it raised its hand, palm forward. She couldn't move. Her body felt rooted, her lungs locked. Something deep in her bones knew this was the moment. She was supposed to acknowledge it and refuse it. But it looked so much like her. Too much. The room around her began to vibrate softly, like distant thunder. The candle flickered violently. The air grew thick and metallic, as if charged with static. The figure in the mirror placed its hand on the inside of the glass. She could see the smudge forming, slowly. A perfect palm print, just like the one before. She tried to lift her hand to mirror it, to reject it, but her fingers refused to respond. She was paralyzed. The figure began to mouth something. No sound came through, but she knew. She could read her own lips. You stayed. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced her forehead, blinding, splitting. She screamed, and the world snapped. She was standing in the room again, in the reflection, but this time everything felt wrong. The light was dimmer. The walls looked older. The mirror had no glass, just a black void pulsing faintly. She looked down at herself. Same clothes, same skin, but when she moved, the world lagged half a second behind. She ran to the door. It didn't open. She turned to the window. Outside, the street was frozen. The cat was still mid-step. A paper cup hovered in the air. Time had fractured. And then, from the mirror, though it had no glass, a face emerged. Her own, looking in from the real world. Terrified. She reached out, slammed her palm against the frame, tried to scream, but the girl on the other side didn't hear her. She stepped back and walked away, leaving her behind. The loop had closed. She wasn't just someone who had stayed too long. She was now part of the mirror, part of the room, waiting, just like the ones before her. And soon, she knew. The listing would go back up. Cheap studio, fully furnished. One simple rule: never stay past 3:33 a.m. Not even once. She didn't remember when the screaming stopped. It might have been hours or seconds. In this place, time wasn't measured in minutes anymore. It was measured in patterns, repeats, glitches. She would blink and the room would reset. She'd wake up lying on the bed, same position, same thin sheet, always cold, always silent. She'd stand, look in the mirror. Sometimes she was there, sometimes she wasn't. Sometimes she saw someone else entirely. She tried to write notes to herself, carve words into the wall. You're trapped, don't trust the mirror. But the next time she blinked, they'd vanish. The walls would be smooth again. Only the handprints remained. So many handprints, some hers, some too large, some too small, all pressed to the inside of the mirror, faint, repeating. She started forgetting her name, forgetting what day it was, forgetting her voice. Every time she tried to speak, the sound came late or didn't come at all. The room responded faster than her own body. And then, one day, something changed. She woke to silence like always, but there was something else. A hum. Faint. Digital. The mirror flickered. Not the pulsing black void it had become, but static, like a television searching for signal. And through the fuzz, she saw something. A new girl, standing in the studio, bright-eyed, tired, clutching a small suitcase, looking around the room with hope and hesitation. And behind her, on the desk, was a piece of paper. The rental contract. The red clause. Never stay past 3:33 a.m. The girl walked around the space, exploring, the way she once did. Touched the countertop, peered into the wardrobe, smiled at how quiet the neighborhood seemed. She screamed, banged against the mirror, waved her arms. The girl didn't see her, didn't hear her, just like she hadn't. The reflection rippled, the static buzz grew louder, and for a moment, just a breath, she felt something click into place. A lock, a substitution. The studio wasn't haunted in the traditional sense. It didn't trap souls out of cruelty. It was a system, a loop, a place that required someone to stay behind in order for someone new to move in. Balance. She had broken the rule, and now she was the rule. Her image would be in the next listing, half visible, just a blur, until the next girl stayed past the hour, until she replaced her, and only then would the door open again. Only then would she be free. But free to go where?
The new girl stayed. She signed the contract. She moved in. She unpacked. And slowly, inevitably, she began to notice the silence, the stillness, the subtle lag in her reflection, just like before. From within the mirror, the one who came before watched it all unfold, powerless, weightless, silent. She had no voice now, no body, only presence. And yet, something stirred. Because this time, something was different. This time, she could feel herself again. A shape, a boundary, a self, not just an echo. The mirror had accepted her, not as a prisoner, but as a part of it. And so, little by little, she began to test it. At first, she could only blink, a beat after the new girl did. Then came the subtle shifts, smiling when the girl wasn't, tilting her head just slightly the wrong way. The girl noticed. She hesitated longer in front of the mirror. She covered it with a scarf. But that didn't matter anymore. The mirror no longer required permission. At night, the scarf would fall on its own, fold itself, return to the floor. Every time the new girl slept, the old one came closer. She could now see into the room clearly, feel the temperature, smell the dry air, hear the faint buzz of the fridge. And most of all, she could mimic each gesture, each movement, but not perfectly, because her mirror self was no longer just a reflection. It was a version, a warped, sentient copy, born from the ritual, shaped by silence and fed by time's fracture. And slowly, it began to crave more, not just to watch, not just to echo, but to replace. The new girl began to complain of feeling watched. Her emails stopped sending. Her clock froze once at 3:33, but she laughed it off until the night she didn't. The mirror self waited as it always did, waited for her to linger too long, to fall asleep too close to the hour, to break the rule. And then the transition would begin. The mirror self smiled now, full and steady, because it remembered something important. The real threat was never in the claws. It wasn't about staying too late. It was about what woke up when you did. The girl blinked at her reflection, confused, because this time her reflection was already smiling, and it didn't blink back.
Time began to slip. The new girl, her name was Yuna, stopped keeping track of the days. At first, it was small things. She'd look at the clock and realize it had jumped 10 minutes without warning. She'd check her messages and see replies to texts she didn't remember sending. Food in the fridge would disappear faster than she remembered eating it. Then came the calendar. She crossed off Monday, then Tuesday, then the next morning, it was still Tuesday. She crossed it off again, then again. Eventually, she stopped marking anything. Every time she looked at her reflection, she looked more tired, hollowed out, like she'd been running a marathon in her sleep. Her friends said she seemed distracted, disconnected, but she couldn't explain it. How do you explain lost time? How do you tell someone the mirror is watching you live your life one beat too late? She started filming herself, setting up her phone overnight, trying to catch whatever was happening at 3:33. But in the morning, the footage was gone, every time, replaced by static or a video of her sleeping soundly for hours, except she knew she hadn't. She remembered the whispers, the knocking, the pressure on her chest. And once, she remembered standing in front of the mirror and watching herself sleep, like her body was in bed, still, breathing, unaware, while she, or something wearing her face, stood in the corner, head tilted, just watching. She couldn't tell what was dream and what was memory anymore. One morning, she woke up and the desk was gone. Just gone. Replaced by an older one. Slightly different color, a crack in the wood, something from a different time. She opened the drawer. Inside was a note, a scrap of paper, yellowed and curling at the edges. 3 words, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "This isn't yours." She dropped it, ran to the mirror, tore off the scarf, stared at herself, her face, her eyes. Still her, but not entirely. She leaned closer, and her reflection didn't. It stared straight ahead, expressionless, and whispered something she couldn't hear. She backed away, but the voice echoed in her ears, even without sound. The loop was starting again. Days were repeating, objects were shifting, and she was no longer the only version of herself in the room. Someone or something was living her life alongside her, and it wasn't waiting to be invited. It was already making itself at home. Yuna had had enough. Whatever was happening, whatever this place was doing to her, it had started with the contract. That stupid paper, that one-line rule. Never stay past 3:33 a.m. She pulled the document from her drawer, hands trembling, the paper colder than it should have been. It felt heavier now, almost damp with something she couldn't see. The ink looked darker than before, the red claws more vivid, like fresh blood still drying. She didn't care. She took it to the stovetop, lit a match, held the flame to the edge of the page. It caught quickly, curling black at the corners, and for a brief moment she felt something lift, like a thread had snapped inside the apartment, loosening the grip around her chest. She watched the fire eat the paper, watched it fall into the sink, smoldering into ash. And then, silence. Not the usual silence, not the stillness she had come to fear. This was different. It was absence, a dead vacuum, like the apartment had stopped breathing. She turned slowly. The mirror was uncovered again. She knew she hadn't touched it. She approached carefully, unable to look away. The reflection was there, her, but she was holding something. The contract. Still whole, unburned. In the mirror, her other self smiled, calmly, gently, and raised the page to show her. The red claws still glowed. And then she saw it, just below the original line, another sentence.
one that hadn't been there before. It read, "You agreed. You cannot revoke." She stumbled back, ran to the sink. The ashes were gone. In their place, a fresh sheet of paper, untouched, her signature at the bottom, even though she had watched it burn. The rule couldn't be destroyed, because the rule wasn't just written, it was part of the room, part of the loop, part of her. She collapsed on the floor, heart racing, whispering over and over, "I didn't mean to stay. I didn't mean to stay." But the room didn't care. The mirror didn't care. The contract would return again and again, no matter what she did, because now she was the clause. And even if she left, the rule would go with her.
She stopped sleeping, not because she didn't want to, but because sleep no longer obeyed her. One moment she'd be sitting at the desk, eyes open, heart racing. The next, she'd wake in bed, the clock blinking 3:33 a.m. Every time. Always the same hour. She tried setting alarms, leaving lights on, even pinching herself until she bled. None of it worked. No matter what she did, she would always wake at the threshold, never before, never after. And each time, it felt a little more permanent. The room darker, the mirror closer, reality thinner. She began to lose track of what was dream and what was waking. She'd find herself walking through the apartment only to blink and realize she was still lying down. She'd hear sounds that didn't exist, voices humming from the wardrobe, laughter echoing from behind the mirror, the kind of laughter that didn't belong to her voice. She marked days on the wall, tally lines in pencil, until the wall reset. She wrote letters to herself, left them under the pillow. They came back blank. Time was no longer linear. It spiraled. Every path led back to that one cursed moment, that one cursed number, 3:33. She watched it happen once in real time. She sat awake, fighting sleep, eyes wide open, whispering the seconds aloud. 3:29, 3:30, 3:31, 3:32, and then her voice stopped. Not her breath, not her thoughts, just her voice, frozen in her throat. The digital clock on the wall flickered, then glowed. 3:33. And then everything stopped. The sound of the city vanished. The hum of the fridge disappeared. Even the ticking of the wall clock dissolved into stillness. She stood slowly, walked to the mirror. The other version of her was already there, already waiting. But now it wasn't mimicking her. It was leading. It moved first, tilted its head, raised its hand, smiled, and she followed. Not because she wanted to, but because the moment demanded it. Time was no longer a rule, it was a loop, and she was the string caught in the gear. She tried to scream, but there was no sound left in her throat. She raised her hand to the mirror, trying to touch it, trying to break through. But this time, it didn't feel like glass. It felt like water, cold, inviting, endless. She stepped forward, and the mirror accepted her. No resistance, no shock, just silence. Behind her, the clock still read 3:33, and it always would. For her, there would be no morning, no sunrise, no escape. Just this hour, again And again, and again. 3:33, forever. Somewhere far from the mirror's pulse and the frozen hour, the city kept breathing. Scooters passed through neon-lit intersections. Steam rose from street stalls. Students laughed outside convenience stores. Time moved forward, unaware, uninterrupted. And in the corner of an online rental site, a listing quietly reappeared. No fanfare, no notifications, just a familiar photo. Modern studio in central Taipei, fully furnished, quiet neighborhood, available immediately. The price was, once again, impossibly low. And below the description, bolded in red, was the rule. Tenant must not remain on the premises between 3:33 a.m. and 3:34 a.m. under any circumstance. Violation of this term voids liability. There were no reviews, no comments, only a timestamp showing it had been posted 3 minutes ago. Click. A new girl, a different one this time. She sat in her tiny dorm room, tired eyes scanning the screen, stress thick in her shoulders. Rent in the city had doubled. Her parents had stopped sending money. The campus was too loud. She needed peace. She needed quiet. She clicked through the photos: bed, desk, kitchenette, mirror. Simple, clean, too good to be true. But desperation makes believers out of skeptics. She copied the contact number, sent a message. Within seconds, a reply. If you're serious, the apartment is ready. No questions about the clause. Bring 1 month's rent. She hesitated, then typed back, I'll take it. Somewhere else, behind glass that wasn't glass, someone smiled. Or something. Because the listing didn't just find tenants. It found replacements. And as the new girl packed her suitcase and closed her laptop, the image on the screen flickered, just for a second. A blur behind the mirror in the photo. Barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it. A face, not quite smiling, just watching, waiting. And by the time she moved in, the clause would already be waiting on the desk. Printed, ready, unburnable, unbreakable. And if she stayed too long, just one night, just one mistake, the room would make space, as it always had, as it always would. The girl didn't know she was part of a ritual. Not yet. She thought she had simply found luck, a rare miracle in a city that chewed up the broke and sleepless. She thought the landlord was strange, sure, cold, brief, but plenty of landlords were like that. She thought the clause was odd, yes, but not threatening. Just a superstition, a leftover rule from some old family belief, something quirky. She didn't know the mirror was watching her before she even walked through the door. Didn't know it had chosen her. Because the ritual didn't begin when the paper was signed. It began when the previous one surrendered. When the former self gave in. When the loop reset. It was never about punishment. It was about balance. A cycle must complete to begin again. A place out of time needs a soul tethered to it, anchored, bound. And so, the mirror waited patiently. The wardrobe creaked again. The closet breathed. The echo returned. The girl noticed things. Small things. The faucet dripped, even when turned off. The lights flickered, but only near the mirror. Her voice echoed late.
Her eyes felt tired before her body did. She didn't know it yet, but the ritual had already begun. Somewhere in the apartment, behind walls too smooth to remember cracks, the old tenant, now not quite human, drifted through loops of silence. She had no name anymore, only purpose: to welcome the next, to anchor her, to complete the replacement. Every part of the ritual followed rhythm, pattern, precision. First, the attraction, the too good listing. Second, the agreement, the red clause. Third, the breach, the moment of staying past the hour. And fourth, the reflection begins to move first. This was the sign that the ritual was entering its final stage. The girl noticed the mirror reacting slower at first, then faster, then differently. She laughed, brushed it off. Sleep deprivation, she thought. Grad school stress. Until the reflection smiled before she did. Until the reflection blinked when her eyes stayed open. The wardrobe door creaked open on its own one night. Inside, nothing but the hollow scent of old wood. And beneath the mirror, a black thread, tied around a tiny piece of bone, rolled into view from nowhere. A token. A key. She picked it up without thinking, and the moment her fingers touched it, a whisper pressed against her mind. "You're almost ready." The mirror pulsed once, and in its depth, just for a moment, she saw not her face, but the last girl's. Eyes wide, mouth open, screaming silently through the glass. The ritual was nearly complete, and once it was, the mirror would close again. Until the next time.
She should have left. She told herself that every night. Each time the mirror flickered, each time the clock slowed, each time she felt breath on her neck when she knew she was alone. But she stayed. Maybe out of stubbornness, maybe out of disbelief, maybe, deep down, she already knew it was too late. Because once you're part of the story, you don't get to walk away. Not here. Not after 3:33 a.m. She woke one night, unsure how she'd fallen asleep, unsure how long she'd been lying there. The air was wrong again, heavy, still. The clock blinked. 3:33. She didn't scream, not this time. She simply turned her head toward the mirror. The reflection was already standing, not lying in bed, not matching her movements, just standing, watching, and smiling. Her limbs felt light, detached, like she wasn't inside her own body anymore. She rose without will, walked to the mirror. The reflection leaned forward too, mimicking, but not quite. The timing was gone now. The copy was faster, hungrier. This wasn't about haunting, it was replacement. The ritual completed not with violence, but surrender. The moment you stop fighting, the moment you accept that time no longer belongs to you. She placed her hand on the glass. The reflection did the same. But from the other side, she felt skin, warm, smooth, alive. The clock didn't change. 3:33. It never would. Because for her, time was over. The reflection smiled wider and gently pulled her in. Just like the last. Just like the next. And the studio went still again, waiting,
quiet, peaceful. A few hours later, somewhere across the city, a new listing appeared online. No photo this time, just a description. Quiet studio, fully furnished, move-in ready. One simple rule: never stay past 3:33 a.m. And the listing would be clicked again and again and again, because there will always be someone desperate, someone tired, someone willing to break the rule, even if it's just once, even if they think it's just superstition. But the mirror doesn't care about belief. The mirror only needs a body, a face, a name to forget, and a new one to learn. So if you ever see that listing, cheap, convenient, too good to be true, remember this: the rule is not a warning, it's a trap. And if you break it, you don't leave, you replace.